Okay, I may not be able to do this.
Okay, since I have burned some time, automatism, poetics, and surrealism and architecture. The whole, I guess, the mission of the thesis is to research automatism and poetics within surrealism and develop surrealist architecture. Okay, starting off, Andre Breton, he's the father of surrealism. His writings influence surrealist art. My focus is on surrealist art, so using surrealist art to develop architecture. And Breton got his ideas from Sigmund Freud, and Freud having to do with his psychoanalytic treatments of free association, which is a spontaneous, logically unconscious and undirected association of ideas, emotions, and feelings. Surrealism, as it's defined, it's pure psychic automatism, by which one intends to express verbally or in writing or by any other method the real functioning of the mind. It's dictation by thought in the absence of control exercised by reason and beyond any aesthetic or moral gratification. Surrealism started off with automatism, and hence the definition. But as time progressed, surrealism moved more into just capturing the dream or creating a dreamlike state, and you'll see that later on as far as poetics. That's where poetics comes into play. First things, surrealist art, automatism. Here's more of the less conscious form of art. It starts off subconscious, where you draw based on just sporadically feeling, gesture. It's nothing thought, but then afterwards you go and I guess finesse it, or you add what you feel that it's coming out. So it's kind of this mind's eye type of thing. It's like, what can you see within the scribbles or the markings? And here are some examples of different surrealist art. Here's automatic drawing by Andre Masson, and here's Blue by Joan Muro. It first started off with a splot, and then it grew, and then started manipulating the rest of the work to kind of tease out what meaning or what feeling that he had from the original instance that he started with. And then there's Frottage, and that's by Max Ernst, rubbing textures, applying paint to a texture and then rubbing it on paper and developing the scene. And then as you start seeing more with his mind's eye, seeing what the scene would develop, through the markings that he created. And here's another instance where he uses Frottage for the scenery. It's called Eye of Silence. And then here more so is poetics. I term it as poetics because it's not automatic. It's thoughtful from the initial state. It's not gestural. It's very thought out and planned, but it wants to capture what's happening in the subconscious, what's happening within the dream. One lesson, I guess, would be I took from Magritte's work. It's called I can't pronounce it in French, but it's the tragedy of images, or the treachery of images. I'm sorry, and the title is "Ceci n'est pas un pipe," which means this is not a pipe. And his thing was that it's an image of a pipe. It's not an actual pipe, and there was a treachery of image, and that's similar to what we experience in a dream. A dream is not necessarily real. It's just something we conceive within our mind, but to bring that to reality, that's what the surrealists wanted to accomplish. And here's another one by Magritte where it's two hooded people kissing, and for that it has to do with sexual tension and the kind of angst, not being able to fully, I guess, engage with each other. Then you have another image by Dali, Geopolitica's child watching the birth of a new man. This is after World War II. So I'm sure it has something to do with, I guess, this new era that came about. See a man being born out of the world, and it's symbolic, and there's analogy, and that's kind of more so along the lines of what poetics represents. Another thing that I got from looking at these images was form plays an important part, and I'll go into that in the next slide. But the definition is free association is a spontaneous, logically unconstrained, non-directed association of ideas, emotions, and feelings. So what it is just a general overarching just expression of whatever comes to mind initially. Just whatever it is that comes to mind, that's what you put out. Originally it was like a psychoanalytic technique by Freud to kind of give the patient more freedom in understanding what was going on in their head instead of being guided. Because a lot of times people project their feelings on other people, so instead of doing that, Freud decided, free association method, I can fully understand subconscious because it's not coming from external sources. And then autism, as I said before, the act of performing without awareness or conscious relation. Okay, surrealist principles. These are the principles that I gathered from looking at surrealist art. One that stuck out was juxtaposition, and the two things that really they used a lot was scale and context, and ambiguity. That's another thing Dolly uses a lot in his work. Some of it has some of he uses amorphous forms. He blends and melts and does that to kind of manipulate what's the real and makes it kind of unreal by doing those things. Something that would be solid or hard or concrete he makes fluid. And then objectification. This is seen in a lot of surrealist objects. They're sculpture, but it's more about assemblage, where they put together random objects together to kind of evoke this image. Okay, and here's my diagram. Start off with surrealism, move to surrealist art. So the majority of the lessons that I learned are from surrealist art. Gathered those, and then I pulled out principles. Automatism, which is the initial, the starting point of surrealism, and then the other ones that are seen in surrealist art: objectification, ambiguity, and juxtaposition. Then I use those to get to the principle of design in order to place on architectural elements to get an application. And here you have movement, contrast. Not to say I necessarily use all of the principles of design, but they're there, and I'm going to make attempts to use them in order to create find an application. Ones that stood out so far in relation to the principle of design were movement and juxtaposition. So you can see the chart. Contrast. There's a lot of contrast. Objectification can use contrast. Ambiguity is kind of hard to narrow down, so I'm still working on that. But yeah. And here's case studies. These are my precedents. These are just case studies of architectural buildings or elements that gave that had something to do with the principles that I got from surrealism. And this was the School of Design in Toronto, Canada. And this is by yeah, thanks. Yeah, also architects. One thing, like I said, juxtaposition. One with the scale, context, materiality. It really becomes this just object instead of a building, and I took that from the Church of Images by Magritte. You see this form, it's a box, but it's actually a building. But the way it's placed within the context, how it's high above everything, it just becomes this object as opposed to an architectural artifact. It's this box on stilts, I guess. And then another case study was Sagrada Familia. This had more so to do with ambiguity and amorphism. Well, that was an attribute of ambiguity, but another thing had to do with scale, context. This was built before the city got built up, but just it's mainly within the form that it kind of gives you that Dalian type feel. As far as precedents, I chose the Bilbao chose the Guggenheim in Bilbao in Spain. The reason I chose this is because there's more of a semi-automatic start to it. And he has a series of scribbles, and he uses scribbles to create models, and then uses models to create the program. And so this has to do with the automatic part of surrealist art. And here is the precedent. Chose the Guggenheim in New York. The reason I chose this, it's postmodernism, and so there's not really any surrealist, in the spirit of surrealism type museums. They tried with the one in Tampa, but based on research, I didn't think it was surrealist. But I chose this one mainly because of its function, its context, and has more so to do with my application, which I'll show you. My application is it's a children's museum that's going to be located in Louisville and Kentucky, and I thought it was a good fit because it allowed for freedom and whimsy, which is on the other side of surrealism, as opposed to this uncanny, jarring type of feel. There's also a playful type of feel that you get from surrealism, and so that's why I'm in the Children's Museum. This is the site in Kentucky. It's part of an urban development, so hopefully I'll be able to use the context to kind of inspire or to aid in creating a surrealist atmosphere. And here's some more pictures of the site. As you can see, it's pretty bland, which would be good. And here are resources and some presentation.
I didn't quite understand that the children's museums exist.
No, it's a competition, and it's proposed for that site. It's not only that, but it's also going to be a park across the street from it. So I designed a parking.
You're actually doing a competition.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you go back to your diagram?
Sure. Right here, or this one?
All three, and the one above it. Let's start with the one above it.
With this?
Yeah.
Or like?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's another one where you talk about the two kinds of processes. The automatism and the, can I see that one?
Oh. Okay.
So to me, those describe processes.
Okay.
And I think some of your ideas get jumbled up when you include processes with attributes, which is what I see in the one that has the red in it.
Okay.
So you've got automatism
Mm-hmm.
as a principle, but you didn't include the other one that's on the one
Free
above.
association. Oh, you mean free association? Well, that was.
Yeah, and it's really a process. Anyway, those two things to me are processes. They're not principles. I think some of your thinking is not quite clear yet.
Okay.
If you go to the next slide too.
This one?
No, go down, that one.
Okay.
No, the next one.
Okay.
And then you talked about the principles
Mhm.
of design.
Mhm.
I can see absolutely all of those. In all of your case studies, I can see unity, I can see rhythm, I can see pattern, I can see all of those.
I would advocate I agree with you, Deborah, the position, just to take those out.
Yeah.
I think those general principles of design are always there.
Mhm.
And I think that things like, stark juxtaposition or scale reversals or scale, the playing with context and scale and really, pushing that investigation, I think that's going to be more drawing on your surrealist research and these other generic principles of design.
Right.
I just think that's going to dilute everything.
Go up one slide, please.
Okay.
And that's, maybe I'm not understanding your graphics, but one, I agree with the principles versus the process.
Okay.
But, I mean, you've got surrealism as a chunk, and then art is a piece off of that.
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't it be the reverse?
Yeah.
That art is the bigger piece and surrealism is a chunk off of that.
Could be.
Isn't that what you're trying to show, is it's a break off of?
Well, because initially when I started, I just investigated surrealism, and then I guess narrowed it to just the art, because there's more to surrealism than just the art movement itself, and so that's why I did it that way. But since, I mean, I'm mainly focusing on the art, then I just.
Well, to clarify that, is put some of the other applications of surrealism left rust show. The
Okay.
writing, the music,
Okay.
my comment is, I'm fascinated by the topic. And you've got this interesting tension between the mandate of a thesis passage, which has to be scholarly, reading, writing, reasoning, explaining, and an experience you're pursuing, which has to set all that aside. So I guess the comment I want to make is, at some point, after you think your way through all this knowledge and exposure to theory, you're going to have to set it all aside, because the fundamental character of this is instinctual and non-rational.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really interested in how you're going to go about your generative process. I don't know whether you thought about that yet.
I thought it was going to be more so, well, as I was doing it, I thought it would be more intuitive, as opposed to, like you said, more methodical and analytical. So it'd be more so than practicing it and doing more so exercises, like that's what I started doing, sketching, and yeah, mainly just sketching, kind of figure out if this would, if I can see those things within, like the principles within that.
I think you're missing a step there, though.
Mm-hmm.
You have some case studies.
Mhm.
And I think you're missing evaluating those case studies with the principles. You know, how did they achieve emphasis, how did movement, balance, unity? And then you do that, you make yourself a matrix of your case studies
Mhm.
and evaluate their strategies for using those. And then that helps you in your design.
I think he should evaluate not the principles of design, but the general surrealism.
Surrealist principles, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I missed the first part of it. So.
Yeah, and I think that the most interesting part would be the process part of using automatism and the other word, which for some reason I can't remember. But how can you generate designs and just do a zillion of them, trying to use that methodology?
Those methods.
Free association.
It's kind of like Max Stearns does with the Fridays. It's that, like you said, those surrealist artists, they would investigate an idea they dreamt about, an image, or they would investigate a texture or a process of making that no one had done yet, and then backfill some, illusory story or tale, or give it some quasi-imagery. But it was a creative. Surrealism was so, such an amazing kind of period, because these artists were throwing aside reason as a filter.
Mm-hmm.
They were just saying, I'm going to do this and see where it takes me. And I think that's going back to Professor White was saying, how do you do that in the context of a reason methodical thesis? But I think you can. I think you have to do your documentation, and others saying, take general principles of design out, go more into your case study analysis of why these buildings you chose do have surrealist tendencies. That's all part of the research. But the real core of what your investigation is just taking the journey, going out on a limb, a surrealist limb, and see what that takes you. And Guggenheim's not as realist, not to me, a postmodern realism. Not right. You can argue that Gary's is, but
Yeah.
not right.
It was just really basically a precedent for
If it don't call it.
But it's so important that as an architect graduating master's program, you understand. You get a lot of people in your conference throwing, darts at you, something like that.
I'm glad you didn't include those bug models.
yeah,
I
no.
think you can get at it doing those kinds of models.
Yeah.
I don't know, one suggestion I might even just throw out is just take some photographs that you have of your site and do some automatic drawings on top of them. I don't know,
Right.
but it's not, the typical methodology that you see
Yeah.
that we use.
In your program you're proposing, it does involve, its competition does involve an outdoor garden or some type of outdoor exhibit spaces.
It has, across from it has a park. So there's supposed to be a parking, supposed to be a transition between the, it's supposed to be put in like a high-tech center somewhere over there, so there's gonna be a transition space between that and the actual museum.
Well, what I would go with that is that you can obviously explore surrealism in architecture with built form and program, but where you can really explore it is sometimes where you don't have as many of those limitations in gardens, parks, extensions of space, where this whole folly-like surrealist environment. You're much freer with form and exploration because you're not dealing with square footage or something.
Right.
We need to move to the next. Thank you.
That's what makes me feel it's all about.
It's
And so,
Take it over.
I think it's
it's outside.
It's not that big, it's not too big. Covert space, it's kind of the adjacent, it's kind of just kind of a diagonalization between the two plazas.
There's that background.
Kind of vision there, but
Yeah, it's and it's so warm, it's so sweet.
Well, it is.
Who goes
I don't like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really, that was
I
sort
don't
of.
watch them.
Yeah.
20 is 20 late. It's like,
Now they just love it.
Isn't that crazy?
They love it.
no, I walked across.
Oh, it is. Yeah, well, there's so much
I know
exposed.
it's yeah.
We need it like super.
Like they took it.
But.
And
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's actually back there. Like, so, do you know that something like they put
They
it
do, they do.
in the snack machine and then people like taking a stick and then like
Well,
snacking up snacks.
I love that whole, that's the last
I
time.
remember back
We stayed, right?
So Alvaro, are you taking all
What
of
is
this?
one suggestion is you have just two reasons, two story,
millions of years.
age.
He's the one who puts it up.
They're great, they're like fabric.
Sometimes it doesn't go that way.
And that juxtaposition is so
The screen, the person.
strong.
They took the,
It's kind of refreshing.
I usually start with the person and go to the screen, and then when you guys are talking, I switch back to you guys.
And it's perfect for what it is. I just think
I don't think they work.
Bolt's true. Definitely got. Rodney's and Hannah's years ago, my competition, and those took it all from there.
Is he, how old is he? Is he, he's up there, it's like.
Probably, the piano's probably is early seventies, probably late seventies. Yeah, it might be.
Okay. The title of my thesis is Millions Art and Architecture and the Use of Millions Art design architecture. I'm gonna start off my diagram to kind of give a narrative of kind of how I approach my thesis. First, I started off with research and minimalist artists. Then from the research, I extracted theories, forms, design principles from artists and architects. Then I moved on to my analysis phase, which was doing concept models, sketches, personal interpretive works of the art that they did. And then after that, I go on to my synthesis step, which is taking the minimalist architects, what I've extracted from the minimalist architects and what I've extracted from the minimalist artists, and kind of merge those and apply the art to the architecture and do studies from that, and then push on to final design. So first, what is minimalist art? Art is art that exposes the essence or identity of a subject through eliminating all non-essential forms, features, or concepts. It used the simplest and fewest elements to create the maximum effect. I thought this was one of the most strong definitions that I saw of minimalist art. Quote from Frank Stella is kind of what you see is what you see. It's some quote, a quote that he says about his artwork and mentions paintings. I started out by researching painters, Frank Stella and Robert Mango, and what drew me to first start out by Frank Stella is his artwork has a lot of principles of architecture. When you look at it, it's a large scale. He does it with industrial materials. He used house paint, plywood, and different materials like that. And also, his paintings are not about just a small painting or a small thing. He takes up entire spaces and galleries and kind of gives you a illusionistic 3D feeling. So I looked at, and then also Robert Mango. He approached his painting as almost like sculpture. And you see, that's four-color painting. What he did was he took canvases and cut them up and painted them, and then assembled them back together, which I thought also kind of reminded me of some of the principles of architecture. Then I went on to sculptures, Donald Judd, and I looked at Donald Judd. He also, one of his quotes was getting art off the wall. He didn't really do traditional sculpture. He was all about how the space looks, or creating a space within a space, or creating an experience within a space. And his work that I chose to look at is Marfa, and to me that exemplifies what it is, because Marfa, Texas, was like it's like a desert town. There wasn't too much there, and then he came and started doing his concrete block cubes and actually built the foundation. The town started to strive, and people come from all over the world to come look at that. So I thought that was interesting. And then Gary Revere, he actually some of the things that he did, the chair, red and blue chair, it emphasizes structure is one thing that I thought it was interesting. You can see how the outside frames tend to go past each other, overlapping the frames, and then you see the planes are almost like ceilings or walls. I just thought that those were real architectural. And even with his architecture, he took those same principles and pushed those into that. And then I went on to my architects, looking at John Paulson and that and the things that started out with Paulson, most of his architecture, you can see it's very smooth. You can see how the floor and the walls and the ceiling, all of them kind of merge together. He takes out all the non-essential elements. As you can see, he renovated the London Design Museum. You can see how the top is the existing, how it was, and then the bottom is how he renovated. He took out a lot of the unnecessary elements, like the railing for stairs. He went with more of a transparent stair railing at the bottom. He changed the actual cutout in the floor. At the top it was more of an organic round shape, in the bottom it's more of a rectangular square shape. So just like I said, just taking out non-essential elements and also letting more light in. And the same thing with that under in this Fort Worth museum, what he did, he kind of makes a precinct around things, and then he kind of puts his puts his museums or puts his architecture inside of it. So same thing with minimalists. Some of the characteristics of minimalists, he's doing that and adding actually what his spaces are and pushing forward into natural architecture. His that museum is all about or a lot about spaces and different experiences. Like if you stand in one place, you might get a different experience if you go to another. And it's from extracted characteristics. These are some of the characteristics of the minimalist artists. And from looking at their works, looking at their design principles and some of the things they talk about, these are some characteristics that I extracted from them going forward. And also I did the same with the architects. These are some of the extractions that I came from, and looking at those and looking at the ones with the the art, you can see how it's a strong relationship between how they both design. Then I went into my analysis. So I just started doing sketches, looking at the principles and looking at the artwork, just kind of doing like some just quick sketches of my ideas of how I felt like they designed. Then I went into more concept sketches. Like I said, just quick sketches, looking at different works that they've done, looking at the different spaces, and just sketching of them. And here is more pretty much concept sketches. So then for my concept sketches, I went into doing form analysis, thinking about concept models and thinking about how those principles that I got, then how they apply to those sketches, and then how they can come to life as three-dimensional form. So I took all of the artists and architects, which are across the top, and then the second row is their pretty much their works, and then my interpretations of what their work, kind of the things that they're working by. So I just said push forward after looking at those models. Then I went into my personal interpretive work. So what I did was I took the forms of the different artworks of the artists, and then I did like a brief description or think about some of the extractions from those, and then push those forward towards creating an artwork that kind of embodies several different ones. And then even in that thing about going towards architecture, the first stage were just all individuals. They didn't merge with any other artists. And then going forward is the different artists merging into one thing, kind of like how the architecture would be using different levels of minimalist art and different principles, and then gathering them all together. Then after that, I would go into my synthesis design stage. That's where I am now, applying applying what I analyzed and going towards architecture design. And then from there, I would create concept models and show the application of the art finder. And then from gathering my synthesis, what I gathered from that synthesis study, from the forms and the analysis I did from those, I go towards the application. I use the findings to create an architecture design and apply the essence of minimalist art. So started to think about that, a building typology. I was thinking about doing an art gallery. And I did an art gallery. I wanted to do an art gallery because after looking at like several minimalist architects and thinking about some of the buildings they've done, a lot of them have done art museums or galleries. So I think the gallery typology kind of extends the steps of minimalism because it's not about you coming to look at the building per se, but it's experience as a whole. So I thought that would be they kind of embody the same principle as minimalism as what a gallery would do. And then I started thinking about programming spaces of an art gallery. Then my site. The thing about the site, I was looking at different places that had art, like a good art, I guess, environment. So what I did was I looked at the High Museum and looking into some of the information about that, and it says it's a heavy artistic influence of that area. It's the largest concentration of art facilities in the Southeast, and it's adjacent to the High Museum and the Woodruff Art Center. And that's the two buildings that I want to talk about, the High Museum and the Woodruff Art Center. At the bottom it shows the existing venues around, and the top is pretty much my site. And I thought it was interesting because that site is actually open. There's nothing there, and it's across from, it's in this like art district. And I was just shocked that would just be an open site. Nobody would have anything there already. So thinking about my site and thinking about minimalist composition, some of the characteristics of minimalist composition is the spaces between the objects are important. Expand spaces, they have simple shapes and complex arrangements, and they have multiple part structures. And thinking about a site, I wanted to go towards that when thinking about how I want to arrange my site, and not just thinking about my site as the place where I want my business, but thinking about the site as larger art complex. I think about how the High Museum and the Woodruff Art Center and me putting the art gallery, how all those would tie in together. So I feel like doing that, it would kind of think about embodying minimalist characteristics of taking multiple parts, multiple simple parts, and putting together in a complex, and it would be like a complete organization of all three buildings, and it'd be more of a space or experience instead of just going to each one. And then that's kind of like my site composition is kind of like how I started to think about it. The Woodruff Art Center at the bottom, and the High Museum at the top, and then it has the two buildings actually approach their site differently. The High Museum kind of sits back in the corner and has more landscape in the front, and then the Woodruff Art Center, it just takes up the entire site. So, and then to the right is my proposed site, which was across from the boat. So I want to do something where it kind of merges all of those, so it becomes like an entire complex. And that's it.
5 minutes.
I'm not familiar with the Woodruff Art Center. I mean, I've only been to the High Museum. Is it, what is the collection? So what is it about? I'm not familiar with it.
The Woodruff Art Center, it does like, it has a lot of children's exhibits, and it has like art classes also. So they have like summer camps, and it's a place where people can go in the community to go and like learn about art or actually kind of do some art instead.
So how is your museum going to be different? That serves a certain purpose. The High Museum serves a certain purpose. How is yours going to be?
It's kind of like a segue because the art center is more focused on like children art and learning, and then High Museum is pretty much like displaying like great artists. And I want to do a gallery which is like the midpoint of what if someone is around. There's so many like art venues or people that do art in the area. Where can they show their art on a stage that's close to the High Museum or something like that? So it's like the Woodruff will be for children, and then mine would be like the midway between that and the High Museum.
So it would be more for local, kind of like our 621 gallery is, more experimental.
Right.
I think that would be real important in terms of design, right? To make that, to really get that concrete.
I think something that for me would be important to be mindful of as you move through this and move into your application. One stance would be to try to remain true to minimalism so that whatever programmatic issue you're looking at, you pare it down to the fewest moves possible to get it done. The other attitude is minimalism as a launch rocket to move you into design, and then minimalism falls away and you're no longer trying to remain true to it. I think you've got to get clear in your own mind. You don't need to tell us now, but I could see either of those paths being valid. And then your report on your thesis passage would be, what was it like to navigate that?
And two, maybe minor thing, I saw some of your terminology, Eric said something like embrace materials, I think you got that phrase. Yeah. You need to be more specific about what that means. You know, typically the minimal artists and architects, they reveal materials. You know, the materials are always, like you said, the dross is removed, everything's uncluttered, things are what they are. So I think that's what you mean by embrace, but you might be more specific. And then,
I was curious about the phrase complex compositions or complex,
Yeah.
one of your last
Okay, yeah.
slides.
I looked at. Let's see. Is it?
Simple shapes
Complex
and complex
arrangements.
arrangements.
Yeah.
Is that always the case, or is that just one aspect of it that you've chosen?
It's not always the case, but when I was researching, several of them were talking about using like really simple things and then putting together, just like how in the four color painting, he took like canvas and just cut them up, and instead of just arranging them simply, he turned them different ways and put them together to create something different.
I think the danger is the word complex. I mean,
Yeah.
it may be,
Like minimalist and
Right.
complex.
it may be simple shapes and simple arrangements that have complex compositional implications. In other words, the perception of it, that's why good minimalist art is that it gets the most with the least.
Okay.
You know, it's still the arrangements are quite simple. It's just that they're so thoughtful how they're put together that there's layered meanings and layered perceptions. You want to call that complex. But I wouldn't call it complex arrangement.
I thought your presentation and the sort of methodology of how you went through everything, especially how you took the artists and the architects and you that one diagram where you had your sort of ideas and your, I really liked
Yeah,
that.
go back to
I
that.
thought that was very nice.
That was a great, that's your best image,
Yeah,
that's
that
your
was
best
really
research,
nice.
your best image.
Uh-huh,
And I just wanted to say, keep going, now keep going.
That
That one,
yeah,
that one.
yeah, that's really nice.
Do that when you go into your design. Do the same thing. Just like you've gone from the artist, you know, works to your studies, go from the artist's works to your studies to the first architectural moves.
It's this next slide I'm a little confused about. Is that something you designed in the middle?
Yeah.
He did those as your chairs. Both of those, right? You did
But I
both
didn't
of those.
want. I didn't
Oh,
want.
just one, no, you didn't want the one on top.
That's a
Okay.
famous one.
Yeah. It's
Oh,
okay.
okay, okay. I thought you did both.
The one in the middle is a chair?
Yeah.
Yeah. All people
So
don't actually that's trying to say you added that rear triangle or truss in the back for support. But I think you would have done without it. Very much like the chair.
But I admire the work that.
Oh, I
you
do
did.
yeah,
too.
the work and effort, but I'm not sure how that is really going to inform architecture.
Coming from, it's kind of like formalizing, taking like 2D and just like written characteristics and then making a form out of it. So it's kind of like the same thing with how it would go towards architecture. I couldn't just take like the words and then like do something gigantic. So it was kind of like a midpoint between the characteristics and like my research and like architecture. It's kind of like a midpoint between kind of, I guess, gather what I've researched and to make a form, and then from the form just keep continue to go towards architecture.
Yeah, well, maybe more than the form is the joinery. I think the joinery is more in tune with the minimalist way of thinking than the form.
And the form, yes.
So maybe think about not just form, but the tectonic assembly. Which is pretty good.
We need to wrap it up. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.